Well, welcome everyone to what has been a great virtual conference. We've had some wonderful conversations. We began with the business leaders and moved to faith leaders and just had a wonderful conversation with law enforcement. And now we're going to move into kind of a more focused panel on Storm Lake. I want to introduce to you somebody who has been instrumental in making this happen. And so I'm so grateful that she agreed to appear on camera with us. Di Daniels, she works at Salud and has been an advocate for the immigrant community in Storm Lake. She has taught me much about what it means to be an advocate for the immigrant community, and I'm so grateful for her work. And so I wanted to give her the opportunity to introduce this panel and to introduce Alina Rani, who will be leading the panel. So Di, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Thanks, Jason. It's an honor to do this. And it's also a challenge because these women are pretty phenomenal. And I know it's not about me, and so I'm trying to make it short. But overall, I would like to say, first of all, that all of these women may not be currently in Storm Lake, but this is where, through Salud, our lives intersected. And primarily because of immigrant or immigration issues. And in spite of them being between 35 and 45 years younger than me, I consider them friends, as well as advocates and co-workers and mentors. They are that to me as well. And all of them, through their life or their words, have brought me to a more visceral understanding of the challenges, the frustrations, and the resilience and the courage it takes to be who they are and what they do. And overall, at this point in my life, what they bring to me is a huge sense of hope and relief, as I think our future is in really good hands with them. So my short and inadequate introductions of these fine women are as follows, and I'll start with Laura Jacobson. She grew up in Galva, Iowa, a short distance from here. She studied at Northwestern College and went on to study law at William and Mary and was staff attorney at St. Francis Cabrini Center for Immigration Legal Assistance before becoming managing member of the L&L Immigration Law Office in Alexandria, Virginia. She has been to the border a number of times. She's a strong advocate for immigration reform. Married to Alex Vasquez, who is a US-born Nicaraguan. And my anecdote about her is, and she knows what I'm going to say, is that she was a student of mine back at Northwestern College. The class began at, I think she was the only one that was awake and listening. So thanks for that, Laura. Naomi Marroquin. Naomi comes from a family of advocates. Her parents are immigrants from El Salvador, all of them extremely active, participatory in the community. They are just go-to names in Storm Lake. She's studied at the University of Iowa, has been an advocate there, continues to be an advocate through her work at Proteus. I know she's studied global health and has studied and researched particularly the impact of the health of undocumented immigrants detained by ICE. Yeah, a lovely girl. Just, it's amazing to me to remember her as a high school kid and now so strong and such a wonderful leader. Ofelia Rumbo is now a US citizen, was a DACA card holder, and primarily came together knowing that, I've told this to her and others, that Ofelia should be the poster child for the DACA card holders, because hardworking, put herself through college with 2 jobs, not having access to, this was pre-DACA, not having access to scholarships and all that, and just brave and passionate, and in a very respectful, unoffensive way, has spoken to people such as Ted Cruz and Steve King, and questioned them and garnered their respect as well. She is now married to Ben Rumbo and has 2 children. Oh, and did I mention she does? She's HR manager at Cooperative in Pocahontas. Sorry, Ofelia, I see your face and I just carried away into the past. Joanne is many things. Joanne Alvarez, and she is. I put down. She is the LULAC president. LULAC is the League of United American Citizens. United Latino American Citizens, left out the primary word, sorry. Married to Eric Alvarez, and they have one child. She is also working at Plains area in behavioral health, and she's just been pretty amazing. I first met her when she was right out of college, and it's amazing to me to think of her maturity now at that stage in her life, but probably has done the most to help me understand as much as I can, what it is to live as a Latina educated woman, and the glass barriers she has broken through and continues to break through. We've had so many conversations. She is the kind of person that can look you in the eye and call you out on a microaggression, but with love in her heart. And I have appreciated that so much. Her parents, by the way, her maternal grandparents were born in Mexico. They were already citizens when their children were born. Her paternal grandmother is a U.S. citizen, U.S. born citizen, and paternal grandfather did have his residency, but was deported. So she knows firsthand about these incidents. Nguyen, I probably knew for a shorter amount of time, but I met her when she was a BVU student, and immediately drawn to her maturity and her ability to discern. I was always recruiting people for Salud, and she listened carefully and asked the right questions. She now has graduated, and she's an investment operations specialist at Principal Globe Investors in Des Moines, Iowa. She was a Vietnamese refugee. She came here to the States at age 14, not knowing much English, and she is so accomplished and so fluent and so at ease in our culture here, and it is hers as well, of course. She was an incredible liaison when we were as Salud trying to work with the Vietnamese community. She just had the rapport from both sides and fit into that role very comfortably. So again, it's just an honor to introduce each of them in a small way. And I believe you wanted me to say something about Ali as well. Is that right?
Yes,
so,
yes.
Ali Noorani is the executive director of the National Immigration Forum based out of Washington, D.C. It's a nonpartisan advocacy organization that works with faith, law enforcement, and business leaders. But what I know about Ali is that he's come here and he's just real. And he's led a number of things here. It feels like you've been here more than once, Ali. I know he's been in my home and learning how to make pozole with Maria Ramos. And so it's that kind of, fighting I think he had to come through a blizzard to get here, but that kind of willingness to come down and talk to people and listen to people, that's my tip of the hat to you, Ali. Thank you for being who you are, not just what you do, but how you do it.
Thank you, Diane. Hey, how's everybody? Hope everybody is doing well. I'm really, really, really excited for this conversation. There's just a few people I wanted to thank before we jump into it. First, obviously, is Di Daniels. And yes, I came for the pozole and hung around for a handful of events and conversations that Di and Maria and others put together, and just really just enjoyed the time there earlier this year. So Di, Northwestern College, thank you very much for your help. Jason, thank you so much for your leadership in pulling all this together. And then the moderators that you've heard from so far today, Ray Gibler, Mark Prosser, our good friend and forum board member, and then Martha Dreyer as well. So thank you. So let's just kind of jump into this. As Di kind of laid out, we have just 5 incredible women who are leading in so many different ways, and we've got a lot of ground to cover very, in a very short amount of time. So my first question, and I should also just say, I think that everything that is good and great about Storm Lake, whether it's in the past, the present, or the future, is really a product of the leadership that you're going to hear from today. So again, I'm just really thrilled. So let's start with Joanne. I've got a screen full of faces in front of me. So Joanne, when did you first become aware of the challenges that immigrants and refugees are facing, whether it's at the national level or at the local level in Iowa or Storm Lake?
So for me, it was really early on. My community was my church community, which was full of Latinos. I would say probably middle school. I learned that some people weren't supposed to be here. And I think at that point, I kind of grasped that they didn't have papers or they were here illegally. And that was just through like hearing people ask for prayer for God to help their process go quicker, for them not to have to leave their family for a long time. And then I think once I got older, probably high school, I experienced families being deported, and not necessarily deported. So it was the process where one person has to leave the US and stay in, I think at that point it was Guatemala or Honduras for a certain amount of time. So for me, it was a close family friend, and the father had to stay here with their young child. I mean, he was a toddler probably at that time, and his mom had to leave. So that was really traumatizing to me. And that was probably high school age, was when, the church was pulling together. My parents were helping out, trying to help this man raise his toddler for, I want to say it was maybe a year or two. So that was the beginning.
Yeah. Lan, what about from your perspective? When was the first time you kind of saw these issues really starting to impact the community?
I think I'm really similar to Joanne. I came here when I was I started high school here, and I didn't know much English at all when I first came. So because of the language barrier, I didn't really pick up all of this problem and issues and concern that we have with the immigrant situation going on. But not until I was in college. I remember my first year in college, one of my best friend, we were talking, and she just brought up one of the struggle that she's going through, and she's concerned about her dad not being able to stay here, and that is when I started to be aware that this is an issue. My best friend is here with her family. She have 2 siblings, and now she have to live through this situation of being afraid that one day her dad gonna have to go back to his home country, and will never be able to stay here with them and see them grow up and graduate from college and marriage and all of that thing. So that is when it started to become real to me, that I know someone who going through the same going through this situation. So that is when it's become more real to me. I mean, I also experienced other thing as an immigrant student. There's just a lot of things language barrier, lack of education, lack of awareness. And it's just, at least from my own experience, there was not much of I want to say within my circle, there was not much of help. It can come to the point that it's become really helpless. I have experienced like family or even myself, like experience with like mental health. And it was not like a thing that being taught a lot, like mental health within the immigrant community. And I think it's a thing, it's a real thing, like mental health is a real thing. And yeah, I wish it's something that I'm like being aware earlier in my, teen or like college age. But I think mental health within the immigrant community is a real thing.
Thank you very much for sharing that, your story, but also see what you've been seeing over your time and your leadership. Laura, what about yourself? At what point did you become aware of these challenges facing the community?
So my story and perspective is going to be a little different because it was kind of more from the outside looking in, I guess. But like Di said, I grew up on a farm, a family farm near Galva that's like 14 miles from Storm Lake. So really just from the time I was old enough to notice things, I noticed that in Storm Lake, there were a lot of people who didn't look like me, and that was really unusual in Iowa because, in Galva, no one in my high school really was not white. And so I always, we went to Storm Lake all the time for groceries, to go to the movies, things like that. And anyone who knows Storm Lake knows that it's really diverse, and it's something you're going to notice. And at the same time, as a kid, I was really fascinated with my own family's immigration story or my family history. So I kind of was like devouring like any story I could find about why my ancestors came, what it was like for them when they came. And maybe I had an active imagination, but I think, what I've learned since then has kind of confirmed what I thought, that I just kind of imagined like, oh, my family, it was probably like this too. Like they didn't speak the language when they first came. At least in my family's experience, we weren't wealthy people by any means. And but my ancestors made decisions to come look for the same thing that anyone does, to better themselves and better their family, and to do that in a really unfamiliar place, and sometimes a hostile place. There's the history of Iowa. My family is German and Swedish, and Iowa was a really hostile place for German immigrants during the World Wars and people who didn't speak English very well. And so I kind of really quickly started to draw those parallels, like, oh, this is like probably like what my family was like, and now I can see it in real life, and it's what made me eventually want to be an immigration lawyer, was growing up near Storm Lake, and it's kind of seeing the differences, but then also the similarities between us.
That's great. Ofelia, what about yourself? When did you first realize that these were serious challenges facing the community?
For me, it really hit me when when I moved here to Iowa, I moved with my aunt, my mom's sister, and at that time she was a widow, so she had lost her husband, and she had 3 kids. She had a 13-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 10-year-old, and she took me so that I could be of help for her. And she was going through the immigration process as well, being that my uncle was a permanent resident, so he died. So she was left without a legal status. So she was going through the system, and finally the judge decided that she needed to leave the country. She had 3 kids that were born here, U.S. citizens. So I was 17. She left, and I got stuck with 3 of my cousins and myself, and we were all going to school. And for me, that has always been my dream, I always wanted to be able to finish school. So I was watching my three cousins, and that really hit because I couldn't understand how a mom with three kids, US born kids, was just, asked to leave the country and not come back for 10 years. So that was when it really hit me. And then I think also after 9/11, there was a lot of scrutiny with, immigrants, just because before we used to be seen as, oh, okay, they're coming here to work, Mexican immigrants are coming here to work. Now we were seen as potential terrorists as well. So I think that increased the problem. And that's kind of, I realized that a lot of us, including myself, we were having a lot of issues because the immigration proceedings became even more complicated and more difficult for people to go through.
And it feels like we have a sixth panelist to introduce that we need to introduce. Naomi, what about yourself? At what point did you kind of see these issues really of such importance?
Yeah, kind of like what Joanne said, like middle school was like when I kind of understood, because I just remember growing up and like I had friends who were like, oh, we can't do that because my dad doesn't have papers, or we can't like travel because XYZ. Like, and it always was like that term, like no tienen papeles, so they don't have papers. And it was so normalized to me growing up that I was like, okay, like I understand that. And then high school, I understood a lot more because I had friends who were like applying to colleges, but they couldn't get scholarships. Or I had friends who like want to get a job because this is the age we were getting jobs, but they didn't have a license to even apply. So it was like all these little things that I started to recognize, like my own privileges, like in that sense. But it really, really hit me once I moved to Iowa City for college, because I was like, wow, there's not a lot of diversity here. And this is the same year the election was going on. So it was heated around, obviously, the immigration topic. And, it was just like heartbreaking to like hear and people say all these negative things about immigrants, and hearing Trump on TV saying that, Mexicans are bringing drugs, crime, and rapists. And I'm just like, everybody I know is here for work or to give their like kids a better life. So I didn't understand like why there was such a like negative connotation to immigrants, refugees, or anybody coming to this country. So when I got to the university, it was like my second semester, second year, was when I started getting very involved with like at the time it's the bond project, but now it's like the Prairie Lands Freedom Fund, which is like a bond fund for people who get into ICE detention. They pay the bail. So I started volunteering for a nonprofit organization, and then I started doing immigration research, like Di kind of touched on in the beginning about the health impacts of like detention before, during, and after ICE detention. And if you have me on social media, I'm very like I say a lot of things, especially on like Instagram, just because I think kids shouldn't be in cages, they shouldn't be separated. And it really hit me once I moved here, and now I'm working for an organization that helps migrant farm workers, and just providing healthcare. Like like I just remember, I don't even remember what year it was, but the CHC in Storm Lake, whenever they opened, I remember it being like the gates to heaven, because people were finally being able to get healthcare at a like cheaper cost. And I was like in middle school around that time, I think too. So that's when little things growing up and upbringing is like when I started realizing. I even had a conversation with my mom, because I was like, did I ever even ask about like this kind of stuff? And she's like, not really, because she's like, it was so normal. She's like, you saw your dad going in the process. And I do remember even going all the way to Sioux City to drop off documents every once in a while, because my dad was getting papers for my grandparents. So it always made me think, like, what if somebody got stopped on the way to Sioux City? Or what if, they weren't able to pay this? Like, what does this mean for their status? So it was always something in the back of my head that was always lingering. And so, growing up, I just kind of always knew something was up.
What I really appreciate from all of your stories, all of your not stories, your perspectives and your leadership is that it's a combination of what you experienced as individuals, but also what you saw around you, and it's just there's just this a very there's a level of awareness that I think has really served the community overall so well. So for the balance of this conversation, it'll be very easy typically in these kinds of discussions where we spend the next 45 minutes talking about all terrible things immigration, right? And we all leave very depressed and upset, and but that's what the internet's for. So I thought for this conversation, let's talk about what gives you hope. Like what kind of says, okay, what leads you to say or to believe that, okay, things are changing in the right direction. So let's start with what are the policy or the programs or the attitudes that serve the immigrant community, the refugee community, again, whether at the national or the local level, that give you hope? What are the things that you've seen happen from a policy perspective or a service perspective at a national or local level that just lead you to say, okay, you know what, or lead the communities that you work with to say, you know what, things are moving in the right direction. So Lon, could I start with you on this one, please?
Yep, definitely. I think one of the things that give me hope is like the attention that it got from people, thanks to technology and and all of these things. Social media. I know social media can be can be negative, but it can be served for positive purpose. And I feel really thankful for all of the technology and all of the tool that we have out there to drive people attention around this topic of immigrant. I can't imagine 15 years ago, 20 years ago, where there's no such thing as smart YouTube, like all of these tools that are available to us right now. I feel that the immigrant struggle or issues have already been a problem back then, but it never have enough attention, just because we don't, people back then just don't have the technology that we have here right now. So I'm being really hopeful about with all the things that we have available for us right now, people have access to to the information that they should be aware of. But it can be really controversy, on social media, on internet, on TV. But at least people have a chance to, if they need to know something, there's a way for them to know something. And it's such a big topic. Everybody at least here and there heard that term immigrant problem, people being deported. So I'm thankful for and hopeful that people now are a lot more aware of the struggle and the challenge and the difficulty that we're facing, but people are just more aware of it than ever before, and that's a good thing. I think that's a really positive thing, and we can be hopeful for a better future and a better just better generation and people perspective.
That's a great point. And you also, you also made me feel very old, because I remember when I first started doing this work, there was no such thing as YouTube. So, Naomi, what do you think? What are the programs or the attitudes or the policies that have taken place that give you hope?
Yeah, I know. Well, when DACA first started, it gave me a lot of hope for everybody to finally attend school and get a job and, finally do things that they should have been able to do regardless of status. I think to first jump or piggyback off land, technology and the fact that Storm Lake has gotten national recognition for the diversity and the immigrant community, I would like to like say like we're kind of like a blueprint for like what I hope the future and like would look like. So I think that's really cool. But an attitude that really stood out to me was I don't know, it was like maybe 2-3 years ago when SF 481, the bill passed where you are able to ask for like if you have papers, if you got like stopped by police or something. Like that was obviously like a very scary time because I even thought of myself like as a brown woman, like I was like, do you think they will ask me like what would happen? And no, so then if that's my fear, I can't even imagine the fear of like people who are undocumented. So even though that's the negative, like the attitudes that when I saw like even put like our old police chief, like Mark Prosser, he was like, you know, we're here to make them feel safe. You know, I will stop them for a speeding ticket, but like that's where they're gonna get stopped for, not for like why it's not my responsibility to ask for what kind of documentation if they do or they don't have. And so when I saw not only like our own police chief doing that, but like other police chief in other places around the US like say, you know what, that's not our job, that's the federal job. It was nice to see that, you know, maybe there are people like on our side and like who are willing to like just like let things, I don't want to say let things go, but you know, if you're gonna get stopped for speeding, you're gonna get stopped for speeding. That should be it. Like you shouldn't have to be asked like, let me see your like legal status. Like, so seeing attitudes of community members or like police enforcement like do that was a positive out of that outcome.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you're right. I mean, Storm Lake is like famous nationally. Joanne, what do you think? You know, what are the programs, policies that, you know, have dropped into place that give you hope?
I have to agree with Naomi as far as like the local level. I think just there's more feelings of acceptance from leadership, and it's not perfect. We're working on it, but I think that's the point, that we are working towards it. So that's one thing. The biggest thing though is, and this is not policy or anything like that, but the next generation. I think they give me so much hope because they're so outspoken and they really are not taking it from anybody. And I love that attitude. I love, you know, for me, it's huge, like taking up space and being a voice and forcing people to listen to me. And that's not always, it hasn't always been common in Storm Lake. And so to now see the younger generation that are taking up that attitude of, no, you're going to listen to me because you're going to listen to me. I think that brings me so much hope because we haven't had the privilege of being that way in the past, right? So even like my parents and the older generation have had to survive in Storm Lake. So it was keep your head down, go to work, you know, provide for your family and take what they give you because that's all we're getting. We are strangers in this place. And now it's like, no, this is our town. You guys need to be better because we are citizens of this town. And I love anybody that knows me knows I love that attitude.
That's awesome. Ofelia, how are you? Is there somebody else? Is there somebody you need to introduce to everybody?
So I just gotta share that I took the day off from work, so I'm out of my home office and I have 2 little ones running around. So so please bear with me. But
no,
I just got a second Naomi's comment on, you know, what are some of the things that give us hope, and it shouldn't be, you know, back in 2012 when DACA you know, was announced by President Obama, that was just the day that I will never remember because that was one of the days that changed my life. You know, I was able to apply for DACA and then move on and be able to get a work permit, and you know, that changed my life and the lives of 800,000 other people. I know it's not, you know, the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is immigration reform that includes, you know, everybody, but it was a step forward. It really, let's not talk about the negative things anyways. So another thing that gives me hope is, like Joanne mentioned, you know, the new generation of US citizens. These are kids that grew up with parents that were undocumented. they understand the struggles, they understand, the things that their parents have faced. So I think they're more outspoken and they're supportive of, something needs to happen and something needs to change. And I'm also very encouraged by people that are advocating for immigration reform or for immigrants, like people like D. Daniels and, other people in that community that really, support the immigrant community. And they're out there, helping us and supporting that whatever initiatives we want to take on to create awareness on the different issues that affect the immigrants communities.
Fantastic. And then Laura, from your perspective, what are the programs or the policies that give you hope these days?
I'll try to keep it kind of short because it's basically the same, I think, as what everyone else has already said. So it's kind of cool to see that we're all on the same wavelength here. And I'm really grateful to be part of this panel because I won't dwell on the negative, but nationally there isn't a lot of, in my daily work, it's hard to find hope. But locally, I've been listening to this conference all morning, and it just makes me so proud to be from Iowa. Because I think the local policies and attitudes are really a step in the right direction. To hear the law enforcement panel talk about, this acknowledgement that working kind of as a conduit for ICE really damages trust with the community and how that's a really bad thing for all of us. That's huge because, there are communities, I'm in Northern Virginia, and there are communities that run the gambit here, some that are really great about that, and some that you just know. I know all of my Latino young men clients are going to get pulled over in this one county and not necessarily in the other county, and it's because of this cooperation with ICE and other racist policies, to be honest. And it's so great to see Iowa trying to be an example for good policies on that in that area. And also the business leaders, I just think it's so important to hear people who aren't directly affected by immigration, or who don't think that they're directly affected by immigration, to be advocating for it. Hearing business leaders advocating for immigration reform and understanding the economic arguments for that. And I live in DC, so I'm around this kind of legislative thing all the time, and it's just good to hear people being louder, because that's what we all have to do. And then just the last thing is the same as what everyone said, but just the youth, like I feel older like every day I do this, and so to see the energy in like the generation coming after me is just so inspiring. And also to see that it's coming from young people of color. I'm really aware, I guess, that as a white woman, my perspective is just always going to be limited in some respects, and that just is what it is. And so I think that DACA really kind of played into this too, where it created these opportunities for immigrant youth to, realize potential in a way that was kind of lost before DACA. And so then to see, people who've had direct experience with the immigration process having that platform now and using it in a way like Joanne said, that maybe their parents and their grandparents didn't have the luxury to do, has been really inspiring and given me a lot of hope.
Thank you. So the third question, we'll see, we might have a few more questions, but let's see how far we get here. So what changes do you hope for in the future from a policy perspective or programmatic perspective or attitudes? But I guess my challenge to you is that not just the changes that you'd like to see, but how would you make the case for those changes? Because I think all five of you are such incredible leaders, and this is kind of what you do day in, day out. You make the case for these changes. So tell us what change you'd like to see, but how you would like to make that the case for that change. And I think, Lan, we have you for a couple more minutes, so I'm going to start with you again, if you don't mind.
Yes. To answer this question, I feel like I need to like give it enough thought in order to form like the answer that I really want to share. If you don't mind, like skip me for this one and come back after another person have shared. I think I can form my answer a little better.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
Not a problem. Eeny, meeny, Naomi, what do you think?
So I did write a little bit of notes. I think one thing that I would like to change for sure is like DACA and like making it a path to residency / like citizenship, because I don't like using the word fault, but like what kids don't realize what they're doing when they're like little, so they're not paying the consequences like when they're older. Like it's not their fault. Like I said, I don't like using that word. So for them not to be able to like work, go to school, etc. It may just like puts another barrier to all of like this. And the immigration process already like costs thousands of dollars, takes years and years and years. So putting another barrier for young adults and kids, like it's not fair whatsoever. So I think like that would be something I would love to see in the future. At least residency. And let me look quick. Something else I think it was like surrounding attitude. An example like I wrote down was, I was born actually in California, but I grew up in Storm Lake. So Storm Lake's all I've ever really known. It's been my home for 20 years. And I love Casey's Pizza just as any Iowan. I say Ope all the time. But just because I was born in California, does that make me less Iowan? So like all these kids here, like, they're just as American as I am. And so, that's, I wish people had that kind of attitude surrounding religion.
That's great. Lan, are you ready, or should I move to the next person?
No, I think I'm ready.
Go for it.
Yep. I think one thing I hope we could change, or I think it takes a lot of work, a lot of effort, and a lot of thought, but I really think we can make a big difference, and it starts from education and schooling. When I think about myself, and it's from all my own experience, when I came here as an immigrant student, there was no such a thing in school. Like teacher don't talk about it, the counselor don't talk about it. Nobody mentioned about immigrant, like what we should know about it, what difficulty are they facing, what thing people should know about immigrant and be educated on. So I hope like one day that can be changed. If you like, from my own experience, school is the most important place for an immigrant student. Like you come here, at least in my case, you come here with barely any English, and so your parent basically rely on you to get all the information, all of the thing out there. So school is like a perfect place for younger people, like kids, to be educated, to know about all of this policy, or at least aware of it. And then they can bring that home to their parents, and they can, share with them, and they can spread it out. So school is just like a really special place where, especially for immigrant students, like for myself, I just think like school is where I get all of the information, all of the help, all of the this thing, all of this thing that's going on in the world, it come from school, it come from this ESL teacher who like care and like concerned about the issues. So I really think that we can make a big difference if we care more, or if we like change the way school work around, you know, educated student with like this whole controversy thing, the immigrant like challenge, and yeah, it's start from school, start from like the younger people, and they grow up with it, they grow up and remember it, they grow up and, you know, share with people, they grow up and, you know, share with their own family, and so they just have, you know, you build a foundation for people to understand the issues, and from there they you know, spread it out, and you teach them the correct information, the correct, you know, way, correct perspective of looking at things, and they carry it with them, you know, for a long time.
And I got to say, like, I just saw, I think it was from the Storm Lake Times. I'm an avid reader. That actually Storm Lake School District is one of the few school districts in the state that's growing in rural parts of the state, and it's growing because of the immigrant community. And I think that the leadership of the district, from the superintendent to the teachers, is just so remarkable in terms of helping, like you said, Alan, helping students learn who are immigrants themselves, but also the rest of the student community. So let's go to Laura. And Lon, you have to run, right?
Yep.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's my pleasure to share my thoughts and listening to you guys. So thank you for giving me the opportunities.
Thank you. Laura, what do you think? What would you like to change, and how would you make the case for it?
So what I kind of came down on is an attitude thing. Usually when I talk to people from Iowa who don't agree with me on immigration issues, a lot of times you hear kind of this like us versus them, like, but they're taking the jobs or they're taking the benefits, and that means like there's less for me. And kind of parroting, you know, the same like stereotypical talking points without really thinking about it. And, you know, obviously we have to get away from that, but it's harder to do if you're living in a community where you don't, where you just don't interact with people who are different than you. And so I think it's kind of on, you know, those of us who are in those communities or interacting with those communities to kind of step up and say something. You know, I think a lot about, now that I'm not in Iowa anymore, I recognize how like Iowa nice I am. Like, I don't want to talk about that because it makes me uncomfortable, even though like I think what you're saying is really wrong and horrible. I don't want to make waves, and you don't talk about religion or politics, you know, you just, let's like find common ground. And but you know, the longer I deal with these issues, the more, you know, the more I want to push back on that. And to me, immigration issues aren't political. It's about, you know, human dignity and treating people the way you want to be treated. And we can disagree on policy, and that's fine. But I'm not gonna I'm not gonna agree to disagree on like whether somebody deserves the same human dignity that I want to have. And so I think it's kind of just like pushing back on that and kind of calling that out with love, you know, when you see it, and not being afraid. And I kind of push on my parents a little bit on that, and heard a couple stories how they've, I don't know, pushed back on a false, on something not factual that somebody said, and made someone stomp out of a bar or something like that because of it. But like, you know, that person was never going to hear the truth if they didn't say it. So I'm not advocating, for like insulting your neighbors, but just pushing back when somebody says something that isn't right or fair.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. Ofelia, what about yourself? What are the things you'd like to see changed in the future that will give you hope, and how would you make the case for them?
First of all, I think we need to figure out a way for all those DACA students or DACA holders to have a more stable, status. So either permanent residency with a way to get, to become U.S. citizens. And then one thing that I think needs to happen is we need to move towards a larger, all-inclusive immigration reform. And if I'm the person in charge of making that decision, obviously I want to make sure that I'm making the right decision and I'm not driving the wrong behavior, because we can look at history and we can see, the pros and the cons of the different policies that have been implemented. But in this case, we can look at the most recent one, which is DACA, and we can look at the data and we can look at use it as a pilot program to see, what are some of the things that are truly working because DACA happened, and can we replicate that and make it happen for millions of undocumented immigrants that we have in the country at this moment. I think for the majority of the people that I know undocumented, they're hardworking, they're not living off social or welfare. So I think, for me, that's how I work. I like to make decisions based on data, based on, facts. And I think with DACA, and DACA has been around for 8 years now, we can look at that group and say, is it really working? Does it make sense? But not all decisions need to be based on that. It's just legal. Human dignity. We have to do something for those million of undocumented immigrants that are here in the country, that are our neighbors, that are people that we know, our families. So we need to do something. Something needs to happen.
Thank you. And then batting cleanup for us is Joanne. From your perspective, what program or policy would you like to see changed in the future that would give you hope? And, how would you quickly make the case for that?
So I think one of the things, along with everything that was said, is representation. So equal representation of all cultures, all ethnicities in leadership positions. And that's something I preach all the time. Nothing for us without us. And I think that's so important when you're making immigration decisions, when you're making immigration policies, when you're making, decisions on other people's lives, is ensuring that there's not all, you're sitting at a table of all white people deciding what am I going to do with these, brown and black immigrants, right? Because you're never going to make the right decision if you don't have those people in the room telling you, hey, this is what we want. So I think that's so important. And that's across the board, right? So I always talk about that in city leadership, we just cannot make the best decisions for a community like Storm Lake without having the proper representation in our leadership positions.
Well, I just want to say thank you to Joanne, to Naomi, to Ofelia, to Laura, to Lan, who had to step away earlier. Di, thank you so much for the helping organize the panel and lift up these incredible leaders, and for all of your work in Storm Lake. And just, I just want to say thank you. I so admire what each of you have done, and I am so looking forward to what you will do in the future. So thank you. And Jason, over to you.
Yeah, and thank you, Ali, for taking the time to be with us and lead this panel and lead this conversation. And I want to echo my thanks to all of you. I've gotten to meet some of you, and it's always wonderful to go down to Di's house and eat good food and have good conversations. So I'm so very grateful.
And I just want to say, just to interrupt you, like next time you all are making pozole, I'm there. I've been working on my recipe. Tell Maria, I've been a lot of practice.
Yeah,
sorry, Jason.
Great. No, that's great. So a bunch of thanks. Thanks to Adam and Hannah, who have been behind the scenes. You haven't seen them. They've been really making this run smoothly. So thank you so much for making this happen. Di, you really helped me out with this. And so I'm so glad that you're on screen so that I can thank you. You, like I've said, you've been a great influence on me and have really helped me kind of think about these immigration issues, I think in important ways. National Immigration Forum, you know, the BBB mobilizers, and Northwestern College, and the Office of Social Justice and the CRC, who I kind of work for part-time as well. So just throwing out a whole bunch of different names there. One thing I do want to say to everybody is make you aware of the Leading the Way virtual convening, the national convening that will be happening November 16 through 19. Lots of great speakers. So we've had some wonderful speakers, and I think you'll see there's some wonderful speakers who will be on a national level. So an invitation to be a part of that. And this has been a wonderful day, wonderful conversations, and we are going to make sure that we get this posted. And so I just simply ask that you share this with as many people as you can, share it on your social media. I'll try to make sure that once it's available and ready to go, that everybody's aware of it, because it has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation today, and really shows the need for immigration reform, and that I think increasingly there's a louder voice that is moving in that direction. And so the more people we can get this out to, the better. So thank you everybody for attending. Blessings. Go vote and have a great day.